Hey, it's Scott Petrak with another episode of the Brown Zone Coverage Podcast. The Browns couldn't sustain their dominance of Joe Burrow and the Bengals, falling 23-10 Sunday in Cincinnati. They've been all but mathematically eliminated from the playoffs with 4 games to go, making it another disappointing season. At least Deshaun Watson played better. Here to discuss, as always, is Dave Chudowsky of Go, the WKYC Morning News. What's going on, Chud?
Scott, just frustrated. Of course he had to play better, right? After the way he looked in week one, we all have to crawl before we walk, right? So, I guess if that's what we're taking, I don't know if I'm more frustrated after this loss because, and I knew better than to pick him to win, but still I did. And maybe that's why it was more frustrating. But just knowing that it was such a big game and it just, I don't know what it was, but this one just bothered me as much as any loss this year. And maybe that's because I fell into the trap of giving them more expectations. But really, I just felt like all of the excitement and adrenaline was lost right at the beginning of the game with what I think is one of the worst calls in a long, long time. And I understand maybe not kicking the field goal, but to bring in your backup quarterback to throw a deep pass in the end zone on 4th and 1, that's just outthinking yourself. I understand what they were doing, but it was a mistake, and that just was a crusher. I just hated that call.
Yeah, I agree with you. And, when you talk about the disappointment of the loss, I think many things lead into that. The fact that it ruins their playoff chances, right? If they had won that, we talked last week how you could envision a path to the playoffs. Well, that's gone, right? They're like 0.4% playoff chance, according to ESPN. I thought the Bengals were vulnerable. Joe Burrow did not play great, especially early. He was without T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd, his number 2 and 3 receivers, without his top tight end, Hayden Hurst. And it felt like, it was nothing, right? After the first quarter, the opportunities were there, and the Browns did not take advantage. And you're right, that 100% started with that 4th and 1 play call. And really, they get stuffed on 3rd and 1, but then 4th and 1 looks so much worse. And, I get why they did it the week before, right? They did it. They brought in Jacoby Brissett for 1 play against Houston. Houston was different than Cincinnati. You got it because Brissett had started the previous 11 games. It was kind of like a handoff from him to Watson. It just didn't make sense against Cincinnati in that situation, especially like if you ran a quarterback sneak, that's fine. That's what Brissett's great at. Or if you ran something really simple off of the threat of the quarterback sneak. But for Brissett to take the deep shot to Donald Peoples-Jones, so low percentage, coming off the bench cold, overthrows him. He's open, not wide open, but he's open, just overthrows him. And, when I went back and watched it, it looks like David Njoku is open in the flat for a first down, and that's a much easier throw. So I blame Kevin Stefanski, and I blame Jacoby Brissett.
What was the reasoning? Can you enlighten everyone on why they did that? I guess that's the question. What's their answer?
It was, if you bring Jacoby Brissett in, the Bengals think you're going to sneak it. And then you can do something creative off of that. But, I get that thought process in general, right? You want the other team thinking you're going to do something, and then you go the other way, right? That makes sense. That's coaching. But to put in your backup quarterback in such a critical situation, and then for it to be a deep shot, and I don't know if Kevin Stefanski wanted the deep shot. I don't think he did. He gave him 3 receivers. There's a tight end short, a tight end intermediate, and then Peoples-Jones deep. I think he would have preferred the short throw. But there's nothing automatic about that. Unless you sneak it, right? Unless you say, hey, Jacoby Brissett's going to sneak it. He always gets these. That's what we're doing. If you're going to do something else, then just have Deshaun Watson in the game, right? Like Deshaun Watson can run the ball. He could sneak the ball. He can run an option. He can do everything and Jacoby Brissett can't do all those things. So I get the point is the threat of the quarterback sneak is not enough there, in my opinion, to make that move, especially on 4th and 1 in a huge game, right? Just the magnitude of it all makes the call more strange and more confusing and less a good idea. Like other teams have used Brissett
Yeah.
as just a quarterback sneak before. Like he's done that in the past. I think Miami did it with him. They take two out and let him sneak. But this was different. And now you have Deshaun Watson, who should be able to run a bunch of different plays off of that on 4th and 1.
Yeah, right. And basically Stefanski's saying, our goal is to get touchdowns, not field goals. We need touchdowns to win games like this, right? So,
Yeah.
that there's that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have an issue with that, and part of that's because I expect it now, right? I mean, it's 3 years. They're going to go for touchdowns. Now, I do think where he erred a little bit is he said, we thought it was going to be, we need touchdowns in this game, right? He thought it would be a high-scoring game, and that's a miscalculation. Now, it was still early. You didn't know for sure, I guess, that Boyd and Higgins weren't going to play the rest of the game. But at some point, that had to switch, right? The calculus switch and said, hey, 23 points might be enough to win this thing. So maybe a field goal here and there is good or good enough. So I don't know if I blame him for not knowing that on the first possession. I understand that thinking. It's like when you play the Chiefs, right? You need touchdowns to keep up with the Chiefs. So I don't have an issue going for it on 4th down. It's all about the substitution at quarterback and then the choice of either Stefanski and or Brissett to take a deep shot there, especially when he wasn't wide open.
So Stefanski's taking some heat now on some radio shows I've heard and things I've read. And do you feel that he is on any kind of hot seat, or should he give up the play calling duties? Is there anything to this, or do you think he's okay?
I think it bears watching. I think these last 4 games are important to some degree, right? Like the Browns went in the tank and lost the last 4 games, and Deshaun Watson looks terrible. Then I think we have a discussion, right? And I've always said this: the Haslam's are unpredictable, and we know that they make plenty of changes. So I'm never going to rule out that a move is possible. I don't feel like one is imminent, or not even imminent, like at the end of the season. Like I don't feel like one is pending coming to the end of the season, but I want to see how the rest of the season plays out. I understand the criticism. I personally, play calling to me is not his problem, right? We just talked about 4th and 1 Sunday. There's a 4th down play call in Atlanta. Like there's play calls you can point to. That's true with all play callers. I think he does a good job as a play caller. I think he did a great job with Jacoby Brissett. The offense was really good. You can talk about the penalties, and yes, that falls on the head coach. My biggest issue with Kevin Stefanski, it's not an issue, my biggest question is, how does he lead this team, right? Does he inspire this team? And that's something that's so hard to quantify, right? But if I were the Haslam's and I felt that he did.
That's right? A great point.
Like, because to me, I like the fact that he's even keeled. I like the fact that he's smart, right? There's a lot of things to like about Kevin Stefanski. I don't feel like he's overmatched or overwhelmed. There's a matchup or two, against Miami. I felt like they were outcoached. But in general, I think he is head coach material, right? The question is his message still getting through to the guys? Does he inspire the guys? Which is a question because that's not his personality, right? His outward personality is not, he's not a yeller. He's not Dan Campbell in Detroit, right? He doesn't carry that passion on his sleeve. But that doesn't mean he can't be a good coach. So to me, the play calling is not why you would fire him. His management overall is not why you would fire him. I feel like he's got control of things, even if there's penalties, even if there's breakdowns. Like, it's not his fault Tony Fields runs into the punter, right? Or roughs the punter. Like, that's not the head coach's fault. That's a dumb play by a player. If you're going to blame anybody, I guess you could blame the special teams coordinator. So anyway, I guess there's a chance. I'm not ruling out a coaching change at the end of the year. I know there's momentum in the social media and maybe even the media communities. I don't feel like the organization is there, but we still have 4 games, and I think these games matter in how they look. And if it feels like Deshaun Watson's back to normal, they win a couple games. If you're 8-9, that's not terrible, right? It's not great. It falls short of expectations. But to me, that I don't know if that's, man, you got to fire the guy. But if all of a sudden they finish 5-12 because they lose the last 5 games, I feel like that's a much different thing for Jimmy Haslam and D Haslam to think about. Yeah,
I never felt comfortable watching Deshaun in that game. I don't know if it's it seems like he has time, and then it's like he can't find anyone open. He's like, and on TV you can't see the whole field, right? But
Right.
I didn't feel comfortable watching him, although he did look better, if that makes sense.
It does, Chud. I think that's a good way to put it. And I thought the Bengals did a good job. They would blitz some, and he didn't have answers, or the Browns didn't have answers, and then they would drop 8 other times, and nobody's open. And Amari Cooper wasn't himself, so I think that hurt because I remember looking down from the press box in one play, going, like, Cooper just can't get away from this guy. And it was one of those like extended plays, and there's just no chance. He was not in the, he wasn't an option there at all. So I think you're right. I think Watson is still not seeing the field perfectly. Not that quarterbacks ever do, but some guys do, right? But TV pointed out when I rewatched the game, pointed out a couple examples. He had Michael Woods open over the middle one time. He had Mark Cooper on a shallow cross when the blitz was coming right in front of his face and doesn't throw it. So I don't know if he doesn't see it, or not comfortable throwing it, but there's certainly those examples. And then there's the plays where he extends, and then the offensive line gets downfield. What do you do? So I think you're right, and we're still seeing there's plenty of room for growth. But to me, the biggest improvement, the most notable notable, was how he threw it. Right, he didn't bounce any balls. I thought he threw it much better. His accuracy was improved. It's a terrible interception that he threw in the fourth quarter as the Browns tried to come back, and that's all on him. Peoples-Jones was open early, and he waited all day, or waited too long to throw it. And he admitted that he was late, and it let Bates undercut and intercept it. The play before, he made probably his best throw of the day. He's got a guy on his foot yanking him down, and he throws a strike over the middle. So there were signs of progress from a throwing and I think a running perspective. But as far as seeing the field and being completely comfortable in Kevin Stefanski's offense, I think we're still a ways away.
Did he take a lot of the heat from the fans? You were there.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, there were some boos, but nothing that, we're in the press box, so it's hard to tell exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
But I didn't get a huge, it didn't resonate with me at all. I didn't feel the need to ask him about it. Didn't feel the need to mention it. I know that TV showed a no means no sign, and I think you're going to get that. I am fascinated.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think the reception is going to be Sunday? It's his first home game.
I think it will be not overwhelmingly, but I think the majority will be support for him. I think that the more people that are inside that stadium are there to support the Browns and are the people that are going to cheer for the Browns regardless, because I've seen both sides, right? I mean, we've had fans interviewed on Channel 3 on TV where it's gone both ways. Heard from people that are frustrated and say they won't root for the Browns, and then you have others that say it doesn't matter who's at quarterback, I'm still going to root for the team. So, right. In my opinion, I think it's going to be more so favorable for him, and you might have a few outliers here and there.
Yeah, I agree. Right? I mean, if you're that disgusted by the off the field accusations, would you go? I mean, that's kind of how I feel about it. I mean, maybe there's some protests outside, but I think inside the stadium, if you're there, the vast majority will be cheering loudly. Now, I think there'll probably be people there who don't cheer, but don't boo. Just remain quiet, and that's their kind of silent protest. If you have season tickets or whatever, and you're not a huge fan of his. But it will be interesting. It will be worth watching, but I'm with you. I think that's how it goes.
Maybe the diehard people that are against him will be outside, similar to the way, fans that were against the Indians name were over at Progressive Field. Because let's be honest, I know the name ended up changing, but it was kind of a minority amount of fans, or not fans, but people you'd see outside. So maybe it'll be something similar to that. One last thing about the offense that's been brought up a lot too is, the running game. I mean, they had 71 yards, Chubb had 34. Are we seeing a concern at all about Chubb and Watson coexisting?
Well, I think it's a great question. I think that's certainly part of it. Not that they won't be able to, but it's different. And I was writing down my questions for today, and I expect we talked to Nick Chubb in the locker room, and I want to ask him about that because it's different getting the ball out of the shotgun or out of the pistol, right, versus the quarterback's under center. It's different when you have those mesh points where the quarterback might keep the ball, right? You didn't have that with Jacoby Brissett. You didn't have that with Baker Mayfield. So this is an adjustment. I think it is an adjustment for the offensive line as well, which I don't think played particularly well You got the center issue. Froholt's in there. He's not a natural center. I think Whiteller's been dealing with the calf injury. But I do think the Watson element is certainly something that's affected Nick Chubb and affected the running game. I don't think that's a long-term problem, but I think short-term it is. And I'll tell you what, there's no reason to think it's going to get better against Baltimore because Baltimore's got like a top 5 run defense. They got Roquan Smith playing great at linebacker, who they acquired at a midseason trade. So I think it's going to be tough sledding for the Browns again Sunday. Now, maybe Bill Callahan comes up with something. Maybe they go back to more 2 tight ends instead of spreading it out with the 3 wides like they did in Cincinnati. But I think you make a real good point there, Judd.
Yeah. I made a comment on Twitter and some people, came at me a little bit about it because, they take it seriously. And I just threw out a number out there to have fun. But, I picked the Browns because I needed Burrow to show me he could beat the Browns. Listen, I'm not an idiot. I knew eventually he would. But I went with it. I own it. I lost. The Browns lost. That said, now that, he was 0-4, now it just feels like I just turned the game off. I'm like, now he's probably going to win like the next 10 against the Browns. Three Rivers, Jinx, Flacco, Big Ben. I mean, come on. We've seen it time and time again. Now this guy's going to probably own us.
Yeah, I don't think that's crazy. I do think the Browns still match up well with the Bengals. We talked about the corners, the fact you have Myles Garrett rushing. Like those things aren't going away, right? Denzel Ward, Greg Newsome, Martin Emerson. So I think they'll still match up well with them, but that doesn't change the fact that Burrow's awesome. Chase is awesome. The Bengals look like they're going to be around for a while. So I think it'll be more give and take. I don't think the Bengals are going to go on a 10-0 run. But I think we can now go into every game looking at each game in its own entity as opposed to, man, the Browns are 4-0 or now 4-1 against Burrow. Like I think that's now over with.
Well, so bottom line is we're going to see a lot more of Burrow. And, I kind of go back to, we talked about Stefanski before, and will we see a lot more of him? But, to put a close on that subject too, it's, just frustrating too, the flea flicker and all the penalties, just a sloppy game to wrap up the Bengals.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. If you talk about a couple of key plays, right, that roughing the punter, it's a tie game. It's 0-0. The Browns haven't backed up. They'll probably get the ball at midfield. Get a roughing the punter call, keeps the ball with the Bengals. Get a couple more defensive penalties on that drive, leads to the first touchdown. Another penalty extended the second touchdown drive, right? So, yeah, it was sloppy football. We can fight about how much you want to put on the coaches versus the players, but you can't have that, right? You can't have 9 penalties for 98 yards in December against a really good team on the road and win a game. There's no doubt about that. And the flea flicker, I mean, geez, oh man, I asked Joe Woods about that on Thursday. And Martin Emerson gets caught looking in the backfield. He's the corner, so he lets the guy run by him. Safety Grant Delpit takes about 6 steps in, and a right receiver runs by him. You just have to be more disciplined than that. Yeah, you want to pay attention to the run, but you can't lose track of your first assignment.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're talking here on Wednesday, Scott. We got a Saturday game.
I said today's Thursday because it's a Saturday game. Good point, Joe. Good point.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't doing that to correct you. I was doing it more so just make sure that I got to be honest with you. Sometimes I lose track of the days when you get up so early in the morning. So
I believe that.
But yeah, right. Anyway, today, so we're talking on Wednesday. You were in the locker room today already. What kind of feel was in there? And I guess my question is, what's the attitude like right now with this team with 4 games left? And basically, what's the playoff chance? Like 0.4. Bottom line is no playoffs. And, you just got to wonder, are they just playing it out now? Do you feel comfortable that they're going to really come out blazing here in the last 4 games? Or do you think this will be like a lot of seasons we've seen in the past where the season, it just kind of gets away and it's ugly down the stretch?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's that potential, Chud. The guys are saying all the right things, right? The guys that come to the podium, the guys we talk to, it's all about, playing well and finishing strong, and guys that have stuff to prove, whether you're a rookie or your last year deal, whatever. Myles Garrett's going to play through the shoulder injury. Amari Cooper says he's going to play through the the core muscle injury. So, the team leaders and the team's best guys, I trust that they're going to continue to play hard. Having said that, I think it's natural that there is a letdown when the carrot at the end is taken away, right? And the playoffs are the big carrot for everybody in the league is, can you get to the playoffs? Can you get to the playoffs? And we all know the Browns are holding out hope, and they kept saying it. David Njoku, we're not done. And Myles Garrett kept talking about it. So, I was out of practice today, and you just try to pay attention. It's cold, and some of the best players weren't practicing because it's a short week, and they're resting, and they have some injuries. So they're on the bike. Cooper and Clowney and Garrett and Batonio and Conklin are resting. So you look and you go, man, I wonder about the vibe. I really do. Because, guys will play hard, but do you prepare the same way, right? Do you have the same sense of urgency? If you're hurt, how do you protect yourself? Like, all that stuff are real things at this stage of the season. So I think it's something important to watch. I think it's important for Kevin Stefanski to keep these guys together and keep pushing them. Like we talked about it, I think the final record is going to be important. And yes, you have this Deshaun Watson factor, and that's what fans will be focused on. That's what the organization will be focused on. But if you're just another guy in that locker room, I don't know if it's how much you care about the improvement of Deshaun Watson. I mean, long term you do, but let's say you're a guy that's not going to be here next year. If you're Kareem Hunt, does he really care about Deshaun Watson's improvement over the final 4 games? I don't know. I think those are all legitimate, fair questions to ask. And I don't know if I can tell you that they're going to come out blazing against the Ravens, right? We know the Ravens got a lot to play for. They're playing for the North title and maybe even the number 1 seed in the AFC. The Browns are going to have to figure out a way to match that intensity, or else they could find themselves, losing to a backup quarterback.
Yeah, sure. And before we talk more about the Ravens, what did Watson have to say in the locker room today?
Yeah, a couple of key takeaways. He's looking forward to his first home game. It's hard to believe you're going to be December 17th. The guy's never played at First Energy Stadium, preseason or regular season. So he's looking forward to that. And I'm going to write about that later in the week. We talked about the cold weather. The Hasms were concerned that was one of the reasons he didn't want to come here. But, he talked about playing through that, and, that comes with the territory, and he had to block it out. And then he also said that he's nowhere close. I'm going to get this quote exactly right here. He wants to be better than he was in 2020, right? That wasn't good enough, and that's when he led the league in passing. He said, I'm nowhere near where I want to be. This team is also nowhere near where we want to be. So I just thought it was interesting they framed it like that, right? We're focusing on all these little things, completions and scrambles, and he's thinking big picture, like, he wants to be one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and even better than he was when he was playing at a top 5 level.
All right. You ready to move on to the Ravens?
Yes, sir.
All right. What are we looking at quarterback-wise? Are we looking at number 1, number 2, number 3?
It looks like number 2. Lamar Jackson hasn't practiced this week, didn't play against the Steelers. Tyler Huntley, as of Tuesday, he was still in the concussion protocol, but you can practice some while you're in the protocol. So he went through the walkthrough Tuesday, practiced Wednesday. So I believe there's a sentiment out of Baltimore that he's going to start. And he's a pretty good player. The Browns saw him for a bunch of that. I think it was a December game last year in Cleveland. Lamar Jackson got knocked out early. Huntley finished. The Browns won the game, but Huntley was impressive. I mean, I had never seen a lot of him, especially live. And I came really impressed. He throws it okay, really good runner, can extend plays. Similar style. Let me get it out. Similar style to Lamar Jackson. Obviously not as explosive and as dangerous as Lamar Jackson is, right? He's one of a kind. But runs a lot. Their run game is unbelievable. Not only the run game, their quarterback adds an element to the run game. Then they have all those backs with J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards and Kenyon Drake, right? Like they can roll them in and out. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Ravens ran it 45 times, and we've seen that that'd be difficult for the Browns to stop. So I think we're going to get Huntley. If it's not him, then it'll probably be Anthony Brown. And then the Browns should have a really good chance. He's an undrafted rookie. that made his debut last week.
So, Scott, looking at this game, I mean, you have a team that is fighting for a division title against a team that, I mean, you know, they lost last week, and it's just you wonder if they can rebound now with basically no shot at the playoffs. I got to think mentally that's going to be a factor. Do you agree or no?
Yeah, I do. I do. I certainly question that. You know, like I think guys will play hard, but it's different than, you know, it's different than having the same motivation as trying to reach the playoffs, right? And the same motivation as a team on the other side of the field that has a bunch of goals and they're just trying to get to the Super Bowl. So I think you have to watch out for that. You know, there's a spoiler factor. Myles Garrett mentioned that. So, you know, you've seen plenty of times in the league where teams that are out of it beat teams that are in it, but it kind of takes something special.
Yeah. Where are we at injury-wise with the Browns?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, JOK, you know, linebacker Jeremiah Wusu-Koramoah went on IR on Tuesday. So that's the fourth linebacker that's done for the season. He's got a foot injury. Kevin Stefanski said they were still working through whether he would need surgery. But you already had Anthony Walker Jr., Jacob Phillips, Sione Takitaki. So you're really decimated at that position. You're looking at probably your top 3 or 4 guys are Deion Jones, who wasn't here when the season started, Jordan Kanasic, who I think was on practice squad when the season started, Tony Fields II, who was an afterthought when the season started, Reggie Ragland, who they signed off the Raiders practice squad last week. And those are probably your top 4 guys, and you're going against a Ravens team that runs the ball great. I'm going to find out exactly their rank here in a second. Run the ball great, has a backup quarterback, so we'll probably run it even more. You got to, you know, your run defense has struggled for much of the year, at least certainly at times during the year. And the Ravens goes a lot of 2 tight ends, so they put your defense in base. So you got to get 3 linebackers out there. The Ravens are 3rd in the league in rushing. They're better than the Browns, who are 5th. So I think that's certainly a matchup to watch. Outside of that, Amari Cooper is dealing with the core muscle injury. I think he'll play. You know, he sounded when we talked to him Tuesday like he would play. You know, Myles Garrett, Jadeveon Clowney, those guys are kind of fighting through it. I think they'll all play. I guess David Bell's probably a guy to watch, the number 3 receiver. Hasn't practiced, didn't practice Wednesday, would not have practiced Tuesday when they did the estimated report.
All right, prediction time. You ready?
I am.
Why didn't you stop me last week? You just had to be like, oh, man, this is a layup. I'm tying you up in the overall record.
I felt like I gave you every opportunity, Chud. Felt like I did. Like I told you, you can't trust that 4-0 versus Joe Burrow. That felt like a bad stat to me.
I know. But I can't, you know, I didn't want to pick against him every week the rest of the year. So I don't know. I fell for it. I fell for the emotion of a Browns win. But I also thought, you know, it'd be kind of fun if we're both 7-6 heading into the last 4 games. And that's exactly what we are. We're both 7-6. The Browns are 5-8. So here we go. I'll go first. You went first last week. I'm not going to waste any time here. But Browns are favored by 3, which I think is, I mean, I don't know. What do you think about that line? Browns favored by 3.
Yeah, I think it's all about the quarterback. You know, I mean, a little bit of the home field advantage, but I think it's mostly Deshaun Watson should be favored in a matchup with Tyler Huntley, but you know, this is not prime Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, right. 37.5 is the latest over under I saw. I'm not messing around this week. Ravens 20, Browns 17. I mean, do I think the Browns can win the game? Sure. But I'm not picking them. I just think that the fact that there's so much on the line for the Ravens, I don't really buy any home field advantage in this one. And Deshaun Watson, now he needs to prove to me that he can win a game. Like, he can win it. Like, the Houston game doesn't count to me. He's, you know, I know he's 1-1, but it doesn't feel like it necessarily. So I'm going Ravens.
Yeah, shoot. I think all of that's fair, Chud. I really do. I'm picking the Ravens as well. I'm going to go 17-13. The Ravens.
Okay.
I feel like low scoring game. That's a low under, right? 37.5, and I still have it coming in under that. I think the Ravens will be conservative. Like I said, run the ball a bunch. The Ravens are really good defensively. They're like first since Roquan Smith, since the trade in November, at the beginning of November, for Roquan Smith, the linebacker. They're first in league in rushing defense and second in scoring defense. So they're playing really well. Obviously, Deshaun Watson is still finding his footing, still progressing, getting used to Kevin Stefanski's system, all that. Got an Amari Cooper that's probably not going to be 100%. The run game is still trying to figure stuff out with Deshaun Watson. So you put all that in a pile, and I just think the Ravens figure out a way to win. Now, I wouldn't be stunned if Watson were able to make more plays, right? And this kind of progression continued, and he was able to lead a couple of touchdown drives, which would be an improvement over 0-1. And if that happens, then the Browns have a chance. But I've seen this Ravens defense too many times, and it's just really good, and it's playing at a high level. And I think it'll be tough for Watson. He's played him twice before and gotten sacked 10 times when he was at Houston. I just think it's going to be tough, right? First time in an AFC, facing them in the AFC North rivalry. It takes a while to get used to everything that the Ravens throw at you. So I'm going to go Ravens 17-13.
All right, we're on the same page. All right, that's it for me, buddy. Let's see what happens on Saturday, not Sunday. So it should be interesting. A little Saturday afternoon football should be fun, I guess.
Yeah, we go back to back Saturdays. There's this Saturday and Christmas Eve Saturday. So have to get used to that. Is in my job and as fans, right? You got to tune in on Saturday. So I appreciate you taking the time, Chud. I appreciate everybody listening. This has been another episode of the Brown Zone Coverage Podcast. We'll do it again next week, and you can read all my coverage at brownzone.com. Thanks again.